There's a specific kind of morning that arrives not with sound, but with silence. The kind that makes you wonder if you've woken up at all, or if you've simply opened your eyes inside a dream someone else is having about you. Maya Chen felt it before she understood it. Her apartment looked like a catalog page. Everything coordinated. Soft grays, muted beiges, tasteful abstract prints on the walls that meant nothing, said nothing, felt like nothing. She'd chosen them because they were sophisticated, because they matched, because they didn't demand anything from anyone who looked at them. She walked to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror the way you stare at a stranger on the subway, recognizing the form but not the person. She touched the glass, her fingers leaving a faint smudge. Maya whispered to herself, "Who are you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The strange part wasn't that she asked. The strange part was that she didn't know the answer. Maya had perfected the art of efficiency. Every minute accounted for, every choice pre-made. No friction, no hesitation, no mess. She worked as a senior graphic designer at Meridian Studios, a boutique agency that specialized in making wealthy clients look more interesting than they were. She was good at it, exceptional even. She knew how to make beige look bold, how to make emptiness look intentional. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built a career, making things look authentic. She dressed for work. Tailored blazer, neutral tones, hair pulled back in a low bun. Everything about her whispered, "I won't disturb you." She grabbed her bag, keys, the same travel mug she used every day. Her hand paused on the doorknob. For a moment, just a fraction of a breath. She felt it again. That wrongness, like standing in someone else's apartment, wearing someone else's clothes, living someone else's carefully curated life. Maya whispered to herself, barely audible, "Just get through the day." She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. Maya's building lobby was dimly lit, mailboxes lining the wall. She checked hers out of habit, usually empty. But today, there was a single envelope. No address, no stamp, just her name handwritten in elegant script. Maya. The envelope was the color of old paper, cream with edges slightly yellowed, as if it had been waiting somewhere for years before finding its way to her. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a photograph, a painting, abstract, chaotic, exploding with color, crimson bleeding into violet, gold streaking across deep blues. Raw, uncontrolled, alive. Maya's breath stopped. She knew this painting. She remembered this painting. She'd painted it 10 years ago, the year before she decided to be realistic, the year before she enrolled in design school, the year before she learned to package her creativity into something sellable, something safe, something that wouldn't scare anyone, including herself. Maya's hands trembled as she turned the photograph over. On the back, written the same elegant script. "Do you remember who you were before the world told you who to be?" Her knees weakened. The lobby suddenly felt too small, too bright, too real. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground. That painting had been her truth. Wild, unfiltered, unapologetic. Everything she'd spent a decade burying. Maya crouched down, picked up the photo with shaking hands. She looked around the lobby. Empty. No one watching. No one to explain this impossible arrival. Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "Where did you come from?" In the distance, a door opened. Footsteps approached. She didn't know it yet, but that envelope wasn't a memory. It was an invitation. And some invitations, once opened, can never be refused. Maya clutched the photograph to her chest, standing slowly. Meridian Studios was all glass walls and open floor plan, everything white and chrome. Maya sat at her desk, the photograph hidden in her bag. Around her, colleagues moved with purpose, speaking in hushed, important tones about campaigns and metrics. The office felt different that morning, or maybe Maya felt different in it. Her computer screen showed a half-finished logo design for a pharmaceutical company. Clean lines, corporate blue, forgettable. Her cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. She stared at it, unable to move. For 6 years, she'd sat at this desk, For 6 years, she designed things that disappeared into the noise of the world, and she'd been fine with that until today. Someone knocked on her desk partition. Marcus, her manager, mid-40s, expensive suit, permanent expression of mild disappointment, stood there holding a tablet. Marcus said, "Maya, client feedback came in. They wanted more dynamic, but also more subtle. You know the drill." Maya responded automatically, "Rehearsed? Of course. I'll have revisions by end of day." Marcus continued, "Perfect. Oh, and you look tired. Everything okay?" For a moment, something flickered. The urge to scream, to tell the truth, to say, "Nothing is okay. I don't know who I am." But instead, Maya smiled and said, "Just a late night. I'm fine." Marcus replied, "Good. We need you sharp for the pitch next week." His footsteps faded away. Years ago, a British psychoanalyst named Donald Winnicott noticed something heartbreaking in his patients. They built entire lives around being acceptable, wearing masks so convincing that even they forgot what lay beneath. He called it the false self. Not a lie exactly, more like a protective shell we grow to survive the world's expectations. The false self performs. It adapts. It pleases. But it never truly lives. Maya opened her bag, pulled out the photograph, stared at the painting. The colors seemed almost violent against the sterile whites of her office. And the cost of that performance? Slowly forgetting what your true self even looked like. Her phone buzzed. A calendar reminder appeared. Lunch, David, 12:30. She closed her eyes. David, her boyfriend of 2 years. Another appointment. Another performance. The cage was invisible. But that morning, for the first time, Maya could feel the bars. An upscale cafe. Exposed brick, industrial lighting. Overpriced salads. Maya sat across from David, a handsome man in his early 30s, wearing a crisp button-down. He scrolled through his phone while talking. David said, "So I told them if they want the contract finalized, they need to move faster. Supply chain's already backed up through Q3. And he paused, looking up. "Babe, you're not listening." Maya responded, "Sorry, just distracted." David replied, amused but not concerned. "Work stress?" Maya said quietly, something like that. David reached across the table, squeezed her hand. A gesture meant to be comforting, but felt transactional. He said, "Well, don't let it get to you. You're great at what you do. That promotion's basically yours." Maya said quietly, "What if I don't want a promotion?" David froze mid-bite. He laughed, not unkindly, but dismissively. He said, "What? Why wouldn't you? It's everything you've been working toward." Maya asked, "Is it?" The question hung between them. David's smile faltered, confused. David said, "Maya, come on. You're just stressed. Take the weekend off. We'll go to that bed and breakfast you liked." Maya replied, sharper than intended, "You liked. I never said I liked it." Silence. David said, "Okay, what's going on?" Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and realized with sinking clarity that she didn't know if she loved him, or she just loved how easy it was to be with someone who never asked her to be complicated. Maya asked quietly, "Do you even know who I am?" David replied, "What kind of question is that?" Maya said, "A real one." David set down his fork. Annoyed now, he said, "Maya, you're being weird. If something's wrong, just tell me." Maya opened her mouth, closed it. The words wouldn't come because she didn't know how to explain that she'd been performing their entire relationship, playing a role of girlfriend. Well, she forgot it was a role at all. Maya stood abruptly and said, "I need to go." David protested, "We haven't even..." Maya interrupted, "I'm sorry. I can't do this right now." She grabbed her bag and left. David sat alone at the table, bewildered and annoyed, as Maya pushed through the cafe doors into the afternoon light. Psychologist Carl Rogers spent decades studying what happens when who we are and who we pretend to be drift too far apart. He called it incongruence, that uncomfortable friction between your authentic self and the person you show the world. The greater the distance, the deeper the pain. And Maya's distance? It had just become a canyon. Maya walked aimlessly through the city streets, heart pounding, She didn't know where she was going. Just away. Away from the office. From David. From the life that suddenly felt like a trap. When you spend years building a life that isn't yours, there comes a moment, a single unavoidable moment, when the foundation cracks, and you either repair it or let it crumble. Maya rounded a corner and stopped. In front of her was a small art gallery she'd never noticed before. Through the windows, she could see bold, raw paintings. Nothing like the sanitized corporate art she'd surrounded herself with. A sign read, "Emergence, new works by independent artists." Something pulled her forward. The gallery door chimed softly as she entered. The gallery was quiet, intimate. The air smelled of paint and possibility. Maya moved through the space slowly, her breath catching with each piece. Colors screaming with emotion, textures rough and honest, art that demanded to be felt. Then she saw it, at the far end of the gallery, hanging alone on a white wall. Her painting, the one from the photograph. The chaotic explosion of crimson and violet and gold. Maya's knees nearly buckled. Maya whispered, That's mine." Footsteps approached from behind. A woman's voice, calm and measured, said, "It's extraordinary, isn't it?" Maya turned. A woman stood there. Late 30s, silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun, paint-stained hands, eyes that seemed to see through pretense. She wore layered fabrics, mismatched but intentional. Everything about her radiated authenticity. The woman said, "I'm Iris. I curate this space." Maya's voice shook as she said, "That painting, where did you get it?" Iris replied, "Someone brought it to me, said it belonged to an artist who'd forgotten herself." Maya stared at the painting, then back at Iris. She said, "I painted that 10 years ago. I don't understand." Iris asked gently, "Don't you?" The question landed like a stone. Maya's eyes filled with tears she didn't know were coming. Maya said, "I gave it up. All of it. I decided to be practical." Iris repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Practical or safe. Maya couldn't answer. Iris stepped closer, not invading space but offering presence. Iris said, "I see a lot of artists come through here. Some are searching for recognition, some for money, but the ones who break my heart." She paused. "The ones who forgot they were artists at all." Maya said, her voice breaking, "I don't know how to go back." Iris replied, "You don't go back. You remember forward." Iris gestured to the painting and said, "This piece, it's been here for 3 weeks. 17 people asked to buy it. I refused everyone." Maya asked, "Why?" Iris answered, "Because I was waiting for you." Maya's tears fell freely now. She looked at her painting, and saw herself. Not the version she'd been performing, the version she'd abandoned. Abraham Maslow once described something he called self-actualization, becoming the fullest version of who you're meant to be. But he understood something most people miss. Before you can become, you must first unbecome. You must shed the selves that were never yours to begin with. Iris reached into her pocket, pulled out a small card, handed it to Maya. Iris said, "We're hosting an open call for our next exhibition. Emerging voices. Artists reclaiming their truth." She paused. "If you're ready." Maya took the card with trembling hands and said, "I don't even know if I can still paint." Iris smiled knowingly and said, "Your hands remember. The question is, will you let them?" Iris walked away, leaving Maya alone with her painting. Maya stepped closer, reached out, her fingers hovering just above the canvas. The colors seemed to pulse, alive, waiting. Maya whispered, "Who was I before I learned to be afraid?" The question echoed in the empty gallery. And with that question, everything began to crack open. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. Instead, she excavated. She sat on her living room floor, surrounded by old sketchbooks she dug out from the back of her closet. Pages filled with sketches, color studies, ideas she dismissed as impractical. Her hands moved over them like an archaeologist uncovering artifacts of a lost civilization. She remembered the girl who stayed up until 3 a.m. chasing an idea. The girl who got paint in her hair and didn't care. The girl who believed art mattered more than approval. Maya found a journal from 10 years ago. She opened to a random page. Maya read aloud, her voice breaking. Today, Professor Chin said my work was uncommercial. Like that's a bad thing. Like the point of art is to sell. Maybe I don't want to sell. Maybe I want to scream. She closed the journal, looked around her apartment. The beige walls, the tasteful nothingness, the life built on compromise. Two researchers, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, spent years studying what makes people truly thrive versus merely survive. They discovered we all need three things: the freedom to make our own choices, the chance to do what we're genuinely good at, and authentic connection with others. When we trade those needs for approval, when we perform competence instead of pursuing passion, when we sacrifice autonomy for acceptance, something inside us begins to wither. Maya had been withering for a decade. She stood, walked to her bedroom closet. Deep in the back, wrapped in old sheets, she found them. Canvases, blank canvases she bought years ago and never touched. And beneath them, hardened tubes of paint, brushes stiff with age. She pulled them out slowly, reverently. She carried them to the living room, set up a makeshift studio, laid down a drop cloth. She squeezed paint onto a palette. The colors thick, some dried, but usable. She held a brush, feeling its weight. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. Her phone buzzed. Multiple messages from David. "Where are you? Are we okay? You're acting really strange." She silenced it without reading further. There's a particular kind of terror that comes with choosing yourself. Because choosing yourself means disappointing others. It means breaking the unspoken contract that you'll stay small, stay quiet, stay convenient. Maya dipped the brush in crimson, hovered it over the canvas. Her breath was shallow, rapid. Then she painted. A bold, violent streak of red. Then another, and another. Her movements grew more confident, more frenzied. Colors blended and clashed. She wasn't thinking. She was channeling. Hours passed. Maya painting, crying, laughing, covered in color. The canvas transformed into something raw and beautiful and entirely hers. Dawn light began to filter through the windows. When she finally stopped, the sun was rising. Maya stepped back, looked at what she created. It was chaotic, imperfect, honest. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. The first real smile in years. Maya whispered, "There you are." The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote something that would haunt Maya for weeks. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Not dramatic despair. Not the kind that screams. The quiet kind. The slow erosion of self that happens so gradually you don't notice until one morning you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's life. Maya had been in despair for 10 years. But that morning, covered in paint, exhausted and exhilarated, she began the journey back to herself. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus. Emergency meeting Monday 9 a.m. Promotion decision being made. Be ready to present your vision for the senior role. Maya stared at the screen, then at her painting. The two lives, irreconcilable. She looked at Iris's card on the table. The exhibition deadline, 1 week. And she realized the hardest part wasn't choosing herself. It was accepting that choosing herself meant letting go of everything she'd built to avoid it. Monday morning. Meridian Studios conference room. Glass walls, leather chairs, minimalist decor. Maya sat across from Marcus and two executives. A presentation clicker rested in front of her. Her laptop was closed. Marcus said, "Maya, we've been impressed with your consistency and professionalism. This promotion would make you creative director. More influence, more responsibility, more of what you've been working toward." He slid a folder across the table. "We just need to see your vision. Show us where you want to take the department." Silence. No response. No movement. This was the moment she'd supposedly been working toward for 6 years. Security. Status. Validation. Everything that was supposed to mean she'd made it. Maya said, "I'm not taking the promotion." Silence has now filled the room. Marcus replied, "I'm sorry, what?" Maya stated clearly, "I'm resigning. Effective immediately." Marcus leaned back in his chair and said, "Maya, if this is about salary, we can negotiate." Maya replied steadily, "It's not about salary. It's about the fact that I've spent 6 years designing things I don't believe in, for people I don't know, to build a career that was never mine to begin with. The first executive said condescendingly, "That's a very idealistic perspective, but this is how the industry works." Maya responded, "Then maybe the industry and I aren't compatible." Maya stood. Marcus said, "Maya, you're being impulsive. Take a few days. Think about this." Maya replied, "I've been thinking about it for 10 years. I'm done thinking." She walked to the door, paused, turned back. Maya said, "You asked for my vision. Here it is. I want to create things that matter, not things that sell, not things that are safe, things that are true." She paused. "And I can't do that here." The door closed softly behind her. Psychologist Rollo May wrote extensively about what he called existential courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it, to face uncertainty, to embrace freedom, to become who you truly are even when the world offers you comfort for staying who you're not. That kind of courage doesn't eliminate fear. It just refuses to let fear make the final decision. It was evening at Maya's apartment. She was packing a box. Office supplies, awards, the remnants of her corporate life. Someone knocked at the door. She opened it to find David, looking frustrated and hurt. David said, "You quit your job?" Maya replied, "News travels fast." David stepped inside and said, "Maya, what the hell is going on? First lunch, now this? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" Maya set down the box and said, "Maybe, or maybe I'm finally having a breakthrough." David said, frustrated, "This isn't funny. We had plans. The house, the timeline." Maya replied, "Your plans, your timeline." David protested, "We talked about this together." Maya said gently but firmly, "No, you talked." I nodded. Silence. David looked at her like she was a stranger. David said, "So what? You just decided you're a completely different person overnight?" Maya answered, "No. I decided to stop pretending I was the person you needed me to be." David replied, "I don't even recognize you right now." Maya said, sad but resolute, "I know. I didn't recognize myself either. That was the problem." David ran his hands through his hair, pacing. He said, "This is insane. You're throwing away everything." "For what?" "To paint? To chase some fantasy from 10 years ago?" Maya stated, "It's not a fantasy. It's who I am." David countered, "Who you were. People grow up, Maya. They let go of childish dreams." Maya asked sharply, "Is that what you did? Let go of dreams? Is that what growing up means to you?" David stopped. The question hit harder than he expected. His eyes opened when she entered. "Maya," he said. Her name sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. She stood there, unsure whether to move closer. "I saw your painting," he said suddenly. Her breath caught. "What?" "The gallery," he continued. "Your mother showed me. Online." Silence filled the room. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I didn't know that's what it cost you." Maya felt something crack. This was the man whose silence had shaped her choices, whose approval she'd chased without realizing it, whose unspoken expectations had taught her that love was conditional. Psychologist John Bowlby wrote that attachment wounds don't disappear just because we grow up. They go underground. They shape our choices quietly, persistently, until we mistake adaptation for personality. Maya had built her entire life around an unasked question. Will this make you proud? Her father's voice trembled. When you stopped painting, I thought I was protecting you. Maya laughed once, sharp and humorless. You erased me. He closed his eyes. I was afraid, he said. I thought suffering was inevitable. I thought if I could make your life smaller, safer, you'd hurt less. Tears blurred her vision. There's a difference, she said, voice shaking, between protecting someone and teaching them to disappear. He didn't argue. That night, sitting beside his bed, Maya realized something brutal and freeing. Her false self hadn't just been built for the world. It had been built for love. Winnicott was right. The false self begins as survival, as adaptation to caregivers who can't tolerate the child's full reality. Over time, survival hardens into identity. Maya had survived beautifully. and nearly vanished in the process. When her father fell asleep, Maya stepped into the hallway and slid down the wall, shaking. This wasn't closure. This was collision, past and present smashing together, demanding integration. By morning, she knew something had shifted again. Authenticity wasn't just about choosing art over safety. It was about telling the truth in places she'd learned to stay quiet. Weeks later, Maya stood in front of a blank canvas and couldn't paint. Not because she was blocked, because she was afraid. The new work mattered more now. It wasn't just expression. It was declaration. There's a concept in psychology called identity commitment. The moment when exploration crystallizes into action. It's the most vulnerable phase. Because once you commit, you're no longer searching. You're standing. Maya painted anyway. But this time, the work was different. Not explosive. Not chaotic. Controlled. Focused. Surgical. She painted a figure split down the center. One side smooth, pale polished. The other raw, layered, bleeding color. The face turned away from itself. When Iris saw it, she didn't smile. She said, "This one will make people uncomfortable." Maya nodded. Good. The exhibition that followed wasn't celebrated. It was debated. Some people praised it. Others criticized it as unsettling, angry, unresolved. Maya felt oddly calm. Carl Jung believed individuation, becoming whole, requires confrontation with the shadow, not integration without discomfort. But through it, Maya was no longer trying to be understood. She was trying to be true. On the final night, as the gallery closed, Maya stood alone again. But this time, the silence didn't threaten her. It held her. She thought about the life she almost kept, the relationship that asked her to stay small, the job that rewarded her disappearance, the parents who loved her the best way they knew how, imperfectly, fearfully. She didn't hate them. She understood them, and she chose herself anyway. That's the part most stories leave out. Authenticity doesn't require villains. It requires courage. Maya turned off the lights and stepped outside. The city breathed around her, and for the first time, she wasn't asking who she was. She was living the answer. She just didn't know it yet. It revealed itself on an afternoon that wasn't supposed to matter. She had taken a longer route home, not for any reason she could explain, just a subtle pull to slow down. The city moved around her the way it always did. Hurried footsteps, half-finished conversations, lives intersecting for seconds and disappearing again. Normally, she would have blended into that rhythm, adjusted herself to it. Today, she didn't. She stopped. There was a small bookstore she had passed dozens of times before without entering. No signs, no music, just a window stacked with old paperbacks and handwritten notes taped inside the glass. Something about it felt unperformed. Inside, the air smelled like dust and quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you. An older woman stood behind the counter, not rushing, not hovering. They exchanged a glance that required no versioning, no softening, just recognition. Maya wandered the shelves without pretending she was looking for something specific. That's when she noticed it, how different her body felt now. Her breathing was lower, slower. Her jaw wasn't clenched. Her thoughts weren't rehearsing her next move. Psychologists often talk about this shift without romance. Carl Rogers called it congruence. When your internal state and external behavior stop contradicting each other, the nervous system finally stands down. Maya didn't know the term. She just knew she felt settled. She picked up a book she didn't fully understand and bought it anyway. At the counter, the woman smiled not politely, but knowingly. "You didn't choose that book," she said gently. "It chose you." Maya laughed. Not the automatic laugh she used to offer people, but a real one. It surprised her how easily it came out. On the walk home, something small but important happened. She passed someone sitting on the steps of a closed cafe. Young, tense, staring at their phone the way people do when they're waiting for permission to exist. Their eyes met for a moment. Normally, Maya would have looked away, or smiled vaguely, or kept walking. Instead, she paused. "Are you okay?" she asked. Not because she felt obligated, because it was true. The conversation was brief, ordinary, nothing cinematic. But when it ended, the person exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for a long time. So had Maya. She realized then what authenticity was actually doing. It wasn't isolating her. It was making contact possible. Self-determination theorists describe something fundamental about human beings. We need autonomy, yes, but we also need connection that doesn't cost us ourselves. Authenticity wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing honestly. So connection didn't require erasure. That night, lying in bed, Maya replayed the day. Nothing remarkable had happened, and yet everything had changed. She saw how often, before, she had edited herself to maintain harmony. How many times she had confused being liked with being safe. How the false self, the one Donald Winnicott described as a necessary adaptation, had once protected her when truth wasn't welcome. She didn't resent that version of herself anymore. It had done its job, but she wasn't surviving now. She was choosing. Existential psychology speaks quietly about this moment. The realization that authenticity is not an identity, but a responsibility. You don't become yourself once. You enact yourself again and again in how you speak, how you pause, how you refuse to disappear. The next morning, nothing magical happened. She woke up tired. She made coffee. She answered messages, but she answered them differently. She spoke when she meant it. She rested when she needed to. She let silence stay when words would have been a performance. And something else shifted, something unexpected. People around her softened. Not everyone stayed. Some drifted, unable to relate to a version of her that no longer mirrored them. But others leaned in. Conversations deepened. Moments slowed. Her authenticity wasn't loud. It was steady. And that steadiness did something quietly radical. It gave other people permission to stop pretending too. She understood now why the search for the true self always felt exhausting. Because it was never lost. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't buried. It was waiting. Waiting for her to stop performing long enough to notice it. The answer she had been chasing didn't arrive as clarity or confidence or certainty. It arrived as peace. And maybe that's the ending no one prepares you for. Authenticity doesn't feel like becoming someone new. It feels like no longer holding your breath. It feels like coming home, not to a perfect version of yourself, but to a real one, and staying.